down in worship mode. We welcome guests and visitors, members and friends, everyone gathered here this morning, virtually alive on Facebook. I've only read this 14 times. Come into this place of peace and let its silence heal your spirit. Come into this place of memory and let its history warm your soul. Come into this place of prophecy and power and let its vision open your heart. My name is Mike Hanesian. I am your worship associate this morning. I am a member of this congregation and currently serve on the Gifts Committee. I work with Richard with helping with the coffee, and of course, I'm on the road cleanup as my wife runs it. Our worship service today is led by Kit Marlowe. Kit has been a political activist since the 1960s. He has said and believed things that he now acknowledges were foolish. He hopes that the humility in which he regards his past mistakes will help all of us learn when our mind plays similar tricks. Video of today's service will be available on our YouTube channel later today. There are a few announcements for this week. If you would like more information about our Soul Matters small groups or are ready to sign up for the new groups forming in September, please see Jessica Dunn-Safanoff or find the sign-up form on the table in the back of the sanctuary. If you're interested in our first Circle Dinner of the year on September 28th, please remember to sign up at the back table. It's a great way to get to know our members, the members of our congregation. It's also a great way to get food. Get your tickets for the Peter Mayer concert on September 14th. Look for the link in your next weekly announcements newsletter that comes out this evening. There will be a brief meeting for those who volunteered to help with the setup and breakdown of the sanctuary for the annual picnic/scout welcome after the service today in the library. Join us next Sunday for Dennis Bohm and Buddhist happiness practice. There is a widespread misunderstanding that the Buddha taught that life was suffering. While the Buddha did teach that there is suffering, he also taught that joy and happiness exists, and in fact, that there is an end to suffering. We'll look at the practical ways of actualizing the teachings of living in the present each day and to nourish happiness and peace in our daily lives. Welcome to worship.
Please rise and body your spirit. Oh, nope, yep. Yeah. Can you tell I didn't get much sleep last night? The one song that we didn't go over today. And I don't remember it. So let's sing it without I wrote it, so I don't remember it. But I do remember how it goes. So I was trying to get us all to get used to the song, so I was going to put it in for the next couple. Yeah, okay. So the way that the song comes about, well, the reason that the song exists is because of last week when Mark Bernstein was here. And he was talking about welcoming strangers into our lives, and it made me realize how much I was brought up in a way to be afraid, and that can sometimes transfer into personal things. And so I was really moved to write this based on what he what he was going to speak about. So it's, welcome the stranger. I'm going to have you sing with me. So I'm going to sing it first, and then you're going to sing it. Welcome the stranger, welcome the stranger into our lives, into our lives. Welcome the stranger, welcome the stranger into our lives, into our hearts, and into our hearts. Say it one more time. Welcome the stranger,
welcome the stranger
into our lives,
into our lives.
Welcome the stranger,
Welcome the stranger
into our lives,
into our
and
lives,
into our hearts,
and into our
hearts. Let's all sing it together now. 1, 2, buckle my shoe. Welcome the stranger into our lives. Welcome the stranger into our lives and into our hearts. One more time. Welcome the stranger into our lives. Welcome the stranger into our lives and into our hearts. Thank you.
Welcome into this place of healing. Welcome into this place of challenge and growth. Welcome into this place of imperfection and aspiration. You are whole, you are holy, you are wholly loved. Our chalice lighter today is Jack Nimez. And our free lighting candle went out. Please join me in reading the chalice lighting words in the order of service. Flame of our faith, call us into the community of love and justice this morning and every morning. Thank you, Jack. Please rise in body or spirit and sing our gathering hymn, number 1008, When Our Heart is in a Holy Place.
When our heart is in
a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place,
we are blessed with love and amazing grace.
when our heart is in a holy place, and we trust the wisdom in each of us, every color, every
All right, so in 2018, there was a huge debate separating the internet. Does anyone remember what it is? It spilled off YouTube and social media into families and friend groups, and everyone thought they had the right answer, and the other people were just being ridiculous. David, can you show them the video we have, and let's see what side they fall on?
Laurel. 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 Laurel.
So what did you hear? Laurel. Some people. Who heard Laurel? Who heard Yanny? Yeah, so the other people are just being ridiculous, right? Like, how could they possibly hear something that you didn't? You obviously heard Yanny, right, Mr. Kit? And you obviously heard Laurel, right? So it seems silly that people could hear something else. And this was like, believe it or not, kind of silly, but like a big argument. Like, I know I accused my kids of lying to me, that they were just making it up so I would be like silly. Because I was 100% sure that I heard Laurel. I'm on Laurel's side, by the way. But how could people be so sure, how could we be so sure of what we heard? You know, sometimes people just like to cause controversy, but sometimes there's a little bit of science to the differences that we hear. So we have another video for you. David's gonna cue that up.
Do you hear Yanny
Laurel. Laurel.
or Laurel?
Laurel. Laurel.
What?
A recent Twitter poll found that 47% of people hear Yanny, while 53% hear Laurel. Clearly, this has created an internet argument that is dividing the nation. So, what is the science behind the madness? One of the first aspects is priming. If you were to play this clip without providing the option of Yanny or Laurel, you may have heard neither of these words, but by reading them, you're primed to hear one or the other. Secondly, when you speak, you are producing sound waves, which propagate through the air. This is a visual depiction of the sound waves of the original Yanny/Laurel recording, created by Brad Story, a professor of speech, language, and hearing. Here is the depiction of him saying Laurel. You can see that the acoustic features are very similar. Here is a depiction of him saying Yanny. The acoustic features are also similar. So the words Yanny and Laurel audibly are more similar than you might think. Whether you're listening on a laptop, phone, or headphones will influence what you hear based on sound quality. But what if you are listening through the same device, but you hear different things with someone next to you? It might have to do with the age of your ears. The sounds in Yanny play at a higher frequency than the sounds in Laurel. As we age, our ears are less able to hear higher frequencies. So if you are hearing Yanny, you might have younger ears. Luckily, with the help of the internet, we can hear both. Brilliant Twitter user @XXV posted audio of the pitch brought both down and up. When you listen to it brought down 30%, you will hear Yanny.
Yanny. Yanny.
But when you listen to it with the pitch brought up 30%, you will likely hear Laurel.
Laurel. Laurel.
Your brain has so much stimulus at all times that it uses existing information and precise neurological pathways to focus its attention. This is why at a loud party you can listen to your friend beside you, but pop your attention into another convo if need be. Similarly, your brain is unconsciously choosing which frequencies in the recording to pay attention to. So, what is the final answer? If you heard Laurel, you are correct. The original recording is saying Laurel, but with higher frequencies overlaid, creating ambiguity.
Love learning about amazing and interesting things in the world? We actually just started a brand new podcast called Side Note.
So I know, right? So sometimes we think 100% we know a thing to be true. Or so we think. Now, again, this is kind of a silly example, but believing everything we think to be the absolute truth can make it hard for us to see things from another person's perspective, right? Their Yanny to our Laurel. So let this be a reminder to always leave a little room for other possibilities.
That reminds me of another issue that was going around a couple years ago about a photograph of a woman wearing a dress, and was it gold? Was it something else? What I never heard anybody talk about was color depends on the lighting. All you had to do was change the lighting, you'd see one color, you'd change it again, you'd see another color. And that's what Jessica's story was also noting. Change the pitch, you hear it differently. A book is provided in the foyer in which you are invited to write whatever joys and sorrows you have as you enter. I will now read what you have written, and it ranges from the ridiculous to the sublime. Happy birthday, Neil O'Brien.
Wait a minute, we gotta sing happy birthday. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear me. Do you feel all the love? Happy birthday to you.
While we're on the subject of birthdays, today is John C. Wright's 86th.
Wow.
For those who
Okay,
didn't
well,
hear
John might be watching, so.
Yeah, for those who
Happy
didn't hear Judy, 'cause
birthday
she's not
to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear John. Happy birthday to you.
For those who didn't hear Judy, because she doesn't have a mic with her, today is also John C. Wright's 86th birthday, and that's not to suggest Neil is 86. Richard writes, the Scout building has landed. Thank you for all your input, patience, and with this project. All right, the ridiculous. 55 years ago, Mike Canesian and David Fenmore attended Woodstock, and they're still alive, and in parentheses, and weird. Let us share a quiet time to reflect on our week. During the musical interlude, you may come forward and place a pebble in the water to acknowledge a personal joy or sorrow. Let us be in the spirit of prayer. Blessed and holy creation, universe of wonder, mystery beyond definition, we share today our joys and sorrows, listening deeply to the things that cause us to weep and worry, and lifting our hearts as one to those things which we can celebrate together. Our hearts are touched by this shared ritual, and we are connected. We hold in our hearts this morning all those trying to live without the necessities of life. We pray for all people not living in peace, especially those doing so through no fault of their own. We pray for those who are apart from us, whether by distance, time, or conflict unresolved. We pray for those who thirst, whether for water, dignity, or justice. We pray for those who are in danger and who yearn for safety. We pray for our small, blue, fragile planet. Amen. We will now take a moment to give and receive the morning's offering.
Wait, Mike.
We are a circle within a circle with no beginning and never ending. We are a circle within a circle with no beginning and never ending. We are a circle within a circle with no beginning and never ending. We are a circle within a circle with no beginning and never ending. We are a circle within a circle with no beginning and never ending. We are a circle within a circle with no beginning and never ending.
Now we do the offertory. In a moment, the ushers will come forward to pass the offertory baskets among those who are in attendance. If this is your first time visiting us today, you may let the basket pass, as your presence is gift enough. You can also text a donation to 609-293-4495, or for those who are participating online, please visit uucsjs.org and click on the yellow donate button for ways to donate. Each week, we see a small and sometimes great miracle happen as people open their hearts and share their resources with this community of spiritual growth. No matter how you support us, we appreciate you and your generous heart. After all, your donation is what keeps us going, and no matter how these gifts are offered, they are always most gratefully received. The ushers will now accept your morning's offering.
I don't think Dave has put us on the right slideshow yet. Okay. So as you heard, I'm here to talk about tricks of the mind. And lest you didn't read the in full description, I'm not here to talk about tricks that you can play on somebody else's mind. I'm sorry. I'm here to talk about tricks that your mind plays on you. And I also need to upfront tell you that we're going to be using political examples for thinking. But the same errors occur whether you're deciding what medical care to take, or what to eat, or how to do scientific research. All of these tricks can get in your way. Kind of most obvious when we talk about politics, so we're going to stick with that only as an example. Now, the reason I got interested in this, as I said in the introduction, is that when I was 25 and 26, I had some very radical and alienated ideas. Matter of fact, I went to an anti-bicentennial demonstration. It was a very large demonstration. It was like 30,000 people in Philadelphia. And we were saying there's nothing to celebrate. This is a racist, exploitative, cruel country. And over the last 50 years, I've decided that the other countries are more racist, more exploitative, and more cruel. And I'm grateful that I'm here. So I was wrong either then or I am wrong now. But how I came to be wrong became interesting to me. We'd all like to believe that we make decisions using something as rigorous as the scientific method. And the scientific method, although it has specific procedures, comes down to deciding, how do we know what we know? How do we know that we're not engaging in obstacles to truth, like the research biases, the shortcuts to thinking, the self-comfort strategies, and the self-interest strategies that I'm going to talk about today? Now I'm going to knock off the research biases because they don't have a lot to do with what you as a consumer think. If you're involved in telling people stuff, like Jack here, he's constantly telling people, oh, you got to do this, or you got to get that surgery, or don't get that surgery. So he might be guilty of those things. One of the errors that shows up in sociology is called social desirability bias. And that has to do with the person asking, do you believe in so-and-so? And the recipient saying, can I really tell you the truth? So if you did a study in the 1950s, you might find a whole lot fewer people who were willing to say they'd had sexual fantasies about persons of the same gender. On the other hand, you might also find fewer people who were willing to tell you that they'd seriously contemplated violent revolution against the United States government. Things have changed, so when you gather data, you can get different answers. You also have to be careful about the use of statistics. And one of them, as shown in the graphic, is the idea that you have to sample enough people to find things out, and you've got to sample a representative population. If you go around and ask 92 people and you say this is a poll, is what's going to happen in the country, the pollsters tell us that your error function is like 40%. And here's an example of it in graphic. Clearly, the person looking through the hole in the wall is only seeing a small portion of what's there. There's also a selection bias having to do with who you ask. When they did telephone studies in the 1940s, when only rich people owned telephones, they didn't get the information, the thoughts of the poor people. So the telephone pollsters predicted that Dewey was going to win the 1948 election. And if you do telephone research now, you only get answers from old people. Because young folks don't answer their phone. And there's also a reporting bias, And sometimes this is intentional, and we'll talk about that on the next slide, but it also has to do with the idea that if you did a medical study and you proved that eating asparagus was not dangerous, no medical journal wants to publish it. If you prove that eating asparagus causes cancer, man, you can find 5 journals to publish that. So negative results don't show up as often as they deserve to because they ain't newsworthy. Now, like I said, there's also manipulation. I don't know if any of you saw this, this graphic on the internet in the last 6 months. It's trying to persuade us that things were a whole lot better under Donald Trump. And I want to focus on the 4th row from the bottom where it talks about the stock market. They chose the NASDAQ and they chose a specific time period. Let me show you a graphic representing a larger stock market rep, the S&P 500, and a lot more years. Now, if you were a Republican and you wanted to prove that Democrats were bad for the stock market, you'd start in 2017 and compare Donald Trump to Joseph Biden. On the other hand, if you were a Democrat and you wanted to show that Democrats were good for the stock market, you'd start way back up there when Bill Clinton came into office. And maybe the Republicans might say, well, we'll go back till the point where Carter left office. So you see, you can cherry pick what you sample in your argument. I'm going to be telling you that I worry about you falling prey to some of these errors. This is one I'm not thinking you're going to be prey to. But you will be seeing a lot of this kind of stuff. People will be trying to persuade you that this is so. Now, human beings are inference engines. We try to make sense of the world. And no matter how many times people tell us that the world doesn't make sense, we still try to make it happen. We're always looking for an agent that makes something happen. If you show a light show of randomly colored lights going on and off, next to music, your mind will try to construct a relationship between those two data streams. Oh, when the guitar plays, then the blue lights come on, or something like that. Even when it's completely random. That function fuels conspiracy theories. It's not okay to say that, oh, this is just the way things happen. Somebody had to make it happen. What was even better is if somebody I don't like made it happen. Or if it's a good thing, somebody I did like made it happen. And you want to remember this simple rule: don't blame on intent what can be explained by incompetence. Because there's a whole lot of that going around. Now, this character reading the newspaper about one airline accident has a very limited piece of information. And the availability bias is assuming that information you acquire easily is all that you need. That you don't need to construct a rigorous sampling procedure to find out what's going on. An example I like about this, I knew a mathematician who told me that when she grew up in the Philippines, every family in the Philippines had a maid. And I said, Yolanda, that can't be true unless the maids' families have maids. Being a mathematician, she understood where I was going. But the information she had acquired easily was enough to convince her that this was universally so. There's an in-group bias where we tend to trust people like ourselves. I mean, would you listen to a Baptist instead of a Unitarian? And if we like somebody, if they're part of our group, or if you happen to be an upper middle class human being and American, and somebody's dressed like a banker in a three-piece suit with a $500 suit or a $1,000 suit, you tend to put a halo on whatever they say and believe them. If, on the other hand, you're a radical revolutionary who thinks that bankers are out to cheat you, you might put some horns on that person. You can figure out halo's good, horns are the devil, right? So we tend to take our trust of an individual and move it over to everything they say, and eventually they get to something that ain't quite so. And we're now imbibing untruth. There's also cultural biases. Some of this is called framing. Now take the example, and it involves with all these filters that you have in your historic and biological nature that get in the way. So if you were thinking about homelessness and you were actively interested in taking care of poor people, you'd say, oh, those poor people have no homes. And if you were actively interested in increasing and maintaining real estate values, you'd say, oh, those people are making my town look bad and reducing the value of my home. So your frame affects what you see and what you believe. Now, you all are familiar with the idea of taboos. It's something you shouldn't say, you shouldn't do, you shouldn't believe. An interesting example of this, which was covered in Atlantic Magazine a couple of months ago, was some research that showed that ice cream reduced cancer. If you ate ice cream every day. I see there are some people who have a bias in favor of this finding. But when this data was presented to public health researchers, they couldn't accept it. They couldn't deal with it. They said, no, it can't be right. They didn't show what was wrong with the research. They just said, no, can't be, untrue. They were dealing with a taboo that's based on something a little bit more rigorous than don't wear socks with sandals. Now, this also has an effect on identity politics. We often view the world as us versus them. So if people who have been in the military have a bias against people who've never been in the military, and sometimes the other way around. People who have education may be biased against people who don't have education, or the other way around. People believe things based on the gender identity of the person who's talking. Whether they're hetero or homo, whether they're male or female or something else, they tend to believe both what's good for their identity and what's true of the identity of the person they're listening to. And then, of course, there are people who interpret the world based on race. People who will vote for a candidate because he's white, vote for a candidate because he's black, vote for a candidate because he's Chinese. Each of these represent an identity function that may not relate to whether that person's going to govern well. And let me stop here and say that very often these factors overlap. I mean, your race can cause a framing that causes you to have an attribution. So they mix. Try that one. It's also true that, like we were talking about availability bias, you have gathered information so far and you have an idea what's going on, and you anchor to that idea. I believe that let's say bankers are out to cheat me. Or it's sometimes true that you're watching what's going on, and even scientifically, you're gathering data, and you're going to gather 100 points of data, and you gather 7 or 9, and you say, the trend seems to be running that way. And then when all the other data runs the other way, you say, what's wrong with this data? Not what's wrong with my prior assumption. So the question is, does it match my current paradigm? And if it doesn't, then do I really believe this data? You know, whether or not ice cream is going to prevent me from cancer. So what you believe affects what you see, and what you see affects what you then conclude. So you get this bias that keeps you from gathering new information. And that explains belief perseverance, the ability for people to keep believing stuff that, anybody could see the data ain't true. So here's an example of a conservative Facebook post that relates to confirmation bias. Can somebody give me a list of countries I can walk into and they'll give me cash, free housing, and a free phone? Well, it may be that 1,000 or 2,000 immigrants to this country were given a free phone and a place to live based on a specific program. But I can tell you for sure it ain't true of the millions of immigrants that have arrived this year or last year. So this person has a preconceived notion. He finds a little bit of data, a few people who got a free phone, and now it's true of everybody. There's also another trick in here, which is more manipulative and less subconscious, is that if you put an untrue statement in a subjunctive clause, not did you know that millions of people are getting free food, but why hasn't the Democratic Party complained about millions of people getting free food? If you put it in a subjunctive clause, people accept the data more freely because it's assumed in the sentence, and they think they should assume it. Lest you think that only conservatives have this problem, here's something that my friend Jack posted, and the average income is $75,000 going to the bottom, unless you exclude the top 1,000 earners, in which case it's only $35,000. Well, average income is usually measured using median data. That's half of the people have more and half of the people have less. And the average for the United States for per capita income is about 50 grand. It's not affected at all by the top 1,000 or the bottom 1,000. But because Jack was ready to believe that the rich people were exploiting the poor people, and because he already knew that the billionaires had like a quarter of the wealth in the United States, he was ready to accept this. And I said, Jack, let's look at some actual data. So the fundamental on confirmation bias is that if the data changes, your beliefs should change. You should be looking at things and finding out an explanation for the data that's available. We also adjust what we believe in a way that makes us comfortable. We look for status quo and alienation, true believers, resistance to true believers, cognitive dissonance, and the Dunning-Kruger effect. Now, this is the fun stuff. This is stuff that you probably have heard about before. One thing, if you're living a fairly comfortable life, and somebody comes up with a radical idea or a piece of information that suggests that things are not working so well, you've got a conservative tendency to say, well, things are working so far. They're working for me. On the other hand, if you're alienated and you've decided that the world is crooked and the rich are out to hurt everybody, you've got a vested interest in finding that that these things are not true. Anything's got to be better than this, which explains why when the Democrats have a scandal, the Republicans get elected, or the other way around. My nephew Danny had a negative interaction with a state regulator one time that made him very bitter because it put him out of business. And my nephew Danny concluded that government agencies are interested in hurting people. And so the next time Danny heard a story about a government agency that was hurting people, he said, yeah, that's right. And yeah, that's right. And eventually he wound up voting for Trump. Now, another issue is true believers. True believers don't listen to any data. You can talk to them forever, and no information will get in because they are vested. They are comfortable with their own explanation. Now, I used to be a member of the Students for Democratic Society. One of the things that happened to the Students for Democratic Society is that people would meet, and the most radical people would say something like, you poor schmo, you don't understand that everybody's looking, that this whole is all being manipulated, and you're accepting the myth, and then accepting the myth, and accepting the myth, and accepting the myth, and eventually they wound up supporting either Mao or Stalin. They were working themselves by calling virtue radicalism, or radicalism virtue. They eventually pulled themselves so far to the left that nobody was listening to them. Now, there's also a resistance to true believers. Think about how you feel when the Jehovah's Witnesses show up at your door. You know that they're not going to listen to you. Some of the most skillful will look like they're listening to you, but they won't. But because of that, you've developed a resistance, so you tend to not believe anything they say. And also, you need to reflect whether there's anybody to whom you preach. Because if there's somebody to whom you preach, they ain't listening to you either. I told my sister I was going to do this presentation. She said, oh, make sure and include cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance consists of us finding a mental pathway that makes us comfortable when what we believe doesn't match what we do. And it applies, and actually we'll come to an example of that when we come to practical benefits. It also applies to ideas. If you went to school, like I did, they kind of taught you that if you answered wrong, you were not a very good person. So if I'm wrong, I'm a fool, and therefore, I must not be wrong. It's easier to believe that the data is wrong than that you have been a fool. So you fool yourself in order to stay comfortable and confident in your competence. Dunning-Kruger effect is certainly something that you will have heard of, and it consists of the tendency of those with low information to believe they have a lot more information than they have. As you can see in the graphic, early in your knowledge of something, you got like 5 pieces of data, they all match, you've got a model that works, and you say none of this other stuff matters. As you learn more, you say, well, maybe that was a little foolish. So essentially, the people who are exhibiting the Dunning-Kruger effect are too ignorant to know that they're ignorant. Now, self-interest has both a practical and a social viewpoint, or nature. The vested interest practical is exemplified by the phrase that nobody is as blind as the person whose paycheck depends on not seeing. None. Now, here's an example of a fellow whose paycheck depends on something. This is a picture of the gifts given to Supreme Court members in the last 20 years. The dark red bar shows that Clarence Thomas has received $4 million. So I would suggest that he might have a vested interest in seeing that his friends are telling him the truth. I also can't resist telling you the story about justified graft. My friend Tom went to high school in Jersey City in the 1930s. And the Hague machine was controlling the politics there, and it was a really crooked machine. But a lot of the students in the Catholic high school that he attended were sons and daughters of people who benefited from the Hague machine. So the Jesuits, you've heard of them, right? The Jesuits came up with this theory called justified graft. And what it says is that if you're providing services to the community that are really worth $25,000, and the town can only afford to pay you $15,000, it's actually a service to the community if you take $10,000 in graft in order to fund your continued service to the community. Tom swears they actually taught this. And I believe him. Now that's an example both of vested interest political and cognitive dissonance. It was too painful for the kids to believe that their fathers were crooks, so they found a way to believe that their fathers were doing something well. Another example of this is called regulatory capture, where a regulator of bankers or a regulator of fisherfolk spends a lot of time talking to the regulated community, either talking to the bankers or talking to the fisher folk. And after a while, all the information shared by the regulated community, the bankers or the fisher folk, starts to penetrate their thinking. And they start to say, well, if we adopt this new rule, how's it going to affect my bankers? How's it going to affect my fisher folk? Now, more to the point for you guys is vested interest social. I want to ask you, how would your friends react if you were to tell them that you believed that women should not work outside the home? I'm going to suggest that some of them would no longer be your friends. And as we recognize that driver in the way we think, we should recognize that all of the things I've said before are not things that apply to them. They're things that apply to us. So those who oppose you may fall guilty to these tricks, but so might I, and so might you. So I love this bumper sticker that I see sometimes in the parking lot. Unitarian Universalism, where all your answers are questioned. And so I'm fundamentally here to emphasize that idea. Now, one of the easy things to do is if you think you're being fooled, is to sit down and do nothing. And that's a trap too. Indeed, our friend Gina told us just a month ago that we need to be strong and wrong. Now, she didn't mean that we needed to be wrong, but we need to be willing to be wrong in order to find out what's right. I don't usually read to an audience, but I can't resist this one. If I waited until I had all my ducks in a row, I'd never cross the street. Sometimes you have to gather up what you got and make a run for it. But when you're talking to people about what you believe, if you can show some humility, not be a true believer, but instead be an investigator, somebody who's finding out what's going on with their help, you're more likely to get their support. Jimi Hendrix once said, "Knowledge speaks, but wisdom listens." And with that, I leave you with the idea, don't be so damn sure of yourself.
Everyone will please rise in body or spirit. We're going to do 2 rounds. We're going to sing the song first all together, and then break off each round.
Building bridges between our divisions. I reach out to you, won't you reach out to me? With all of our voices and all of our visions, friends, we could make such sweet harmony. Building bridges between our divisions. I building bridges between our divisions. I reach out to you, will you reach out to me? With all of our voices and all of our visions, friends, we could make such sweet harmony. Building bridges between our divisions. I reach out to you, will you reach out to me? With all of our voices and all of our visions, friends, we could make such sweet harmony.
I'd like to thank Kit for the, I think, very thought-provoking comments he had. And as always, I always want to thank our musicians, the members of this organization that have a musical talent I only wish I could approach.
You have other talents, Mike.
I can't sing worth a damn. I come from a talented musical family, and my brother got it all, and I don't mean most, I mean all. I've been known to break a stereo turning it on. I'm long-winded enough, yeah. We now say goodbye to those visiting us online. Thank you for taking part in our service today.